So Caitlyn's grief is this incredibly complex and emotional part of Arcane Season 2, and eventually what causes the inevitable downfall of her and Vi's whole hard-fought relationship. It's truly one of the most masterfully crafted aspects of Season 2 and something the first act has only just scratched the surface on. So while I do believe this is going to get a hell of a lot more complex in the coming episodes, I do want to deep dive into how Arcane has used the deep hitting emotion of grief to develop its characters in a more dark and negative kind of way. Because this is something not just seen in Season 2, but something we of course saw back in Season 1 with Powder and Jinx. Now grief is this incredibly hard emotion or response to tie down to any one situation or reaction. It's almost unique in the way that it's exclusive to the individual themselves. But what's incredibly interesting about that is the many different ways and lessons that can be learned from observing these responses to loss. Allow me to explain. In the beginning of episode 1, we of course discovered that Cassandras Funeral has sadly passed away. And as a result of this, we soon move over to one of, if not the most emotional moment in the entirety of Arcane. The funeral scene for Cassandras Funeral that has taken place in the Funeral household. Now almost immediately we are hit with this black and white backdrop paired with this beautiful but sad soundtrack, instantly almost inducing this feeling of heartache out of me and likely many of you, the viewers. And what's more is it doesn't take long before we begin to see that in this dark black and white setting, not everyone is completely without colour. We can see in this moment that Caitlyn, Vi, Cassandra and this random mostly blacked out silhouette of a child is all bright and colourful. But why exactly is that? Why is it that in this dark, gloomy, sad and emotional situation, we have characters of colour? And why is it just these 4 characters? Why is Caitlyn's dad not also bright and colourful? Well, to answer this, I referred it back to a movie I'd seen many years ago, which employed a similar effect to one of its own scenes. The movie is of course Schindler's List, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now within this movie there's the scene of the girl in red running across the street. She's the only one of colour not just in this scene but throughout the whole movie. And when asked why this was, Spielberg said, in a situation like the Holocaust, life is without colour, and to him colour symbolises life. So using this explanation in contrast to Arcane, we can attribute the lack of colour in this moment to the lack of life felt by almost every single person around. Like for Tobias, Caitlyn's dad, his life has all but been ripped apart by the death of the only woman he has likely and will likely ever love. His life is now without colour. And I believe this is much in the same way for almost every single person in this scene. For you see, Cassandras Funeral was a council member for many years, a public figure who symbolized strength, reason and purpose within Piltover. Her now being dead affects all of Piltover, much like when a public figure that meant something to us dies in the real world. It affects you even despite you not having any real connection to that individual themselves. Your life becomes this dull black and white colour, even if it is just for a moment. But now if this was truly the case for even the people who don't know Cassandra, then why is people like Caitlyn and Vi all brightly lit up in this moment? But much like the girl in red, which was used to make us feel exactly what the protagonist was feeling in that moment, Caitlyn, Vi and the others were used in much the same way, at least in my opinion. They weren't completely colourless because they still have some level of purpose left in their life. That purpose is destroying Jinx. They were coloured to attract attention not just to themselves but mostly to the others around them that are not in colour. For you see, we paid so much more attention to the surrounding characters at this moment, and we of course felt so much more emotion in this moment due to the scene having something as simple as a black and white backdrop. And this is honestly something that makes this scene for me go down as one of the best scenes in all of Arcane. Because to quickly just recap on what we just explained, life without Cassandra is now colourless, but for those that are still driven with a purpose, there's colour to be seen. Now of course the purpose for these girls is to seek revenge driven by their own grief for Cassandra's passing, but to them this is likely all that's keeping them going. Without it they would be all but ripped apart, exactly like Tobias is in this moment. Which of course is exactly what brings us on to our second example of grief felt by Caitlyn in Season 2, her anger. Caitlyn's anger has changed her from this good innocent girl into this no holds bar anything goes soldier. She no longer worries or cares for those around her and only wants to claim the head of the one that took everything from her. She doesn't care who she hurts to get what she wants and is even willing to risk killing a child to achieve her ends. This immediately creates a rift between everything we have seen from her in Season 1 to what she has now become in Season 2. For example, in Season 1, Caitlyn was this moral compass of a character, the one that was almost always seen caring for those around her. Like when she tried to aid Silco's goon in the hull of the ship, or when she hugged Huck after he explained why he didn't want Vi to see what he has become. She was this girl that we saw as much too innocent for the Honor City. She was this naive and honestly kind of stupid and arrogant character at the same time. But now in season 2, fueled by her grief, she has become this scared and unjust killer, who rationalizes almost everything she does by explaining that the ends will justify the means of getting there. This is such a radical shift of a character's perspective and ideals that even Vi begins to see her in much the same way that she now sees Jinx. She sees her as something rotten that has taken over something she once loved. Which is why that breakup scene where Caitlyn leaves and Vi falls to the floor in tears is both unsurprising and almost felt inevitable in the end. We could see throughout the 3 episodes that every choice made by Kate was not one made through rational thought, but one made by her fear, anger, and loneliness that was brought about by the grief she felt for her mother's death. And here's the thing about grief. Grief is this concept of losing someone that you once loved. You mourn them for a time and eventually let them go. You lose something in that process that you will never get back, but it's something completely out of your control. See, our experiences shape and mold us into what we are today. No matter how much we may try, beg, or plead, we will never return to who we were before this change. Now, what do I exactly mean by this? Well, Caitlyn, like it or not, has changed forever because of the passing of her mother. Much in the same way that both Vi and Jinx have forever changed by the passing of Vander. We can try to return to what we once were, but it ain't ever going to happen. All we can really do from this moment forward is push on and hopefully through the help of others, one day achieve some level of decency and goodness again. Caitlyn going forward will never revert back to that innocent girl that we once saw in the brothel. And Jinx will also never return to that 9-year-old Powder that we saw at the beginning of season 1. But that isn't to say they are totally lost to us as of yet, because as we can clearly see in the first act of season 2, there's still a glimpse of Powder to be found within inside the mind of Jinx. Powder, like Caitlyn as of right now, isn't totally lost, and can potentially return one day. They can almost regain parts of who they once were through the help of characters like Vi, Jace, Isha, and even Savika. They can help heal these characters and one day bring back a glimpse of what has been lost. And the thing is, with the more I rewatch Arcane, this is beginning to seem like the whole message of the series. What is lost, but what is left isn't totally lost. And now with all that said, I think that covers it for my thoughts on Caitlyn's grief in the first act of season 2. I'm by far no means of an expert on this topic, just someone who has experienced their fair share of loss in the past, and someone who enjoys chatting about one of their favourite shows of all time. So with that said, I ask all of you, what do you think of Arcane's display of grief? And is there still hope for both Jinx and Caitlyn going forward? Let me know all of your thoughts on that in the comments down below. And while you're at it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would really help us out a lot and I would really appreciate it. But now with all of that out of the way, that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all have a great day or night wherever you are, and peace.